Hello and welcome. You're watching FYI. I'm Sonal Mehrotra Kapoor. Now today's show is going to be all about the vehicle scrappage policy. Now this has created so much talk among the entire automobile industry and even for car owners. What does this mean for you? Today's show is going to be all you need to know about this policy, what should be your approach, and exactly how prepared is India for a policy like this to finally kick in. What are the benefits and some challenges that lie ahead of us? So before getting into any further discussion, we've got a nice guest lineup for you today as well. We'll get into that. But first, it's time for our explainer. So let's start with some basics at this point. What exactly is the scrappage policy? Now, it is a program by the government which is basically to replace old vehicles. Commercial vehicles more than 15 years will have to be scrapped if they do not clear the fitness and emission test, and private vehicles more than 20 years will have to be scrapped if they don't clear that test as well. The objectives are pretty simple. This is a policy which will help us phase out the unfit, polluting vehicles at this point, and this will also be our bit to encourage fuel efficiency, environment-friendly vehicles also to come and replace them and take their place as well. This is also a policy which the government has pitched will create job opportunities as well, and the government has given a number to that at this point. About 35,000 jobs to start with is what the minister has said will be something that they are looking at. The policy is also expected to boost demand for new vehicles. This is a tried and tested formula in other countries as well. Several countries sort of used it to boost in their economies as well, especially in these trying times. And then it is a policy expected to reduce oil import cost at the same time. While I mentioned other countries, USA, Germany, Canada, other nations have also got similar vehicle scrappage policies at this point. And then, well, the big factor why we're all talking about this in the first place is the climate emergency. Now, the latest report by the UN, which highlighted Code Red for Humanity, also went out to make some very strong statements. One of them being that human influence has warmed the climate at a rate that is unprecedented in at least the last 2,000 years. So really, we all need to do our bit to try and encourage this. The Prime Minister also, while announcing this policy, had talked about how startups, young people in the country need to be thinking green and thinking huge in terms of investing and working towards this project as well. But in order to encourage this, there are several incentives that have been proposed, and I know all of you are interested in knowing what exactly is that. Well, let's lay them out for you. Manufacturers can give up to 5% discount for buying new vehicles at this point, zero new registration fee if you have scrapped your old vehicle. That's a big one really over there. And states can give up to 25% rebate on on-road tax for personal vehicles and about 15% rebate for on-road tax for commercial vehicles as well. This is also reduced maintenance cost is what the government is pitching at this point, and increased fuel savings as well, as they're saying will happen for you and I. And in order to dissuade you from using old vehicles, there are some disincentives that have been proposed as well. For example, the states have said that there could be levying of an additional green tax if you decide to keep your vehicle for longer than the time mentioned. Automatic deregistration of unfit vehicles will obviously happen, but if you decide to keep it further, there will be further tax that you're paying on your vehicle. Now, however, there are some exemptions to this. For example, hybrid and EVs, well, they stand to be excluded from this policy. Vehicles using alternative fuels such as CNG, LPG, ethanol, all of them stand to be not part of this policy as well. Farm and agricultural equipment such as tractors and harvesters, they also do not come under this policy. However, this is the controversial bit really, and we'll get into that in our debate as well. But then the government is saying that there are several projected gains at this point with this policy. They're saying the turnover boost for Indian automotive industry altogether. They're saying this will promote new technologies, environment-friendly vehicles will come in, decrease in India's huge crude oil import bill as well, and new investments will come in, and job opportunities, of course, that will be created. However, having said that, there are several challenges at this point. For example, to start with the most scathing one, infrastructure testing and scrapping centers. Do we have enough really? We've got some numbers for you which we'll share on the program as well, and that's not looking very pretty at this point. And also a simpler vehicle deregistration process, I believe that is also something that stands as a huge challenge in the way of this scrappage policy. But remember the timeline for that, which is very crucial. This will start with April 2023, and other categories of this is for heavy commercial vehicles, that is, and other categories excuse me, personal vehicles for instance will start in a phased manner from June 2024. Okay, so having understood that, let's throw it open to our guests now and try and understand how they are looking at this policy at this point. Let me begin with Arindam Guha. He joins us. He's a partner and leader, Government and Policy Services at Deloitte India. Arindam, I read a very detailed article that you wrote out about how India actually stands to benefit and some of the challenges that lie ahead when it comes to this policy. Just take us through, is India ready for a policy like this at this point? And I just want to point this out to our viewers on what is the government data saying at this point, right? The government data talks about how India has 51 lakh light motor vehicles that are more than 20 years old and 34 lakh over 15 years old at this point. And this is according to the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. There are several others, again running into lakhs when it comes to heavy commercial vehicles as well. Are we ready for a scrappage policy like this?
No, I think it is high time this kind of a policy came in because, if you look at other countries, some of which you mentioned, similar policies were introduced way back in 2010. And if you look at India, I think be it all the reasons which you talked about, whether it's high pollution, vehicular pollution, congestion, road safety, it is really the right time to introduce such a policy. Of course, there would be challenges. The primary challenge being that, vehicles are part of the concurrent list under our constitution. And a lot would depend on the state governments supporting the government of India through the incentives, in terms of the incentives which you referred to, whether it's waiver of new vehicle registration charges, whether it is reduction or discounted road tax on the newer vehicles or the replacement vehicles. A lot depends on the state governments when we look at implementation. Even when we look at the infrastructure required for implementing this policy, and of course you covered that in the initial commentary, whether it is registered vehicle scrapping facilities, whether it is testing facilities, and then there's a third category of infrastructure, which are being referred to as integrated scrapping facilities, which are more large scale in nature, use a variety of scientific technologies for scrapping, and we don't expect more than 3 to 4 such centers across the country. So whether it's creating that infrastructure through the right set of policy incentives, a lot of that would depend on the state governments.
Right. I just want to go across to Uday Narang as well. He's the founder for Omega Group and Omega Key Mobility at this point. Uday, what exactly are the costs that are going to come on these vehicle owners at this point on a policy like this? If you could unmute yourself, please.
Oh, sure. Sorry. I just 1 second.
You're on now, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Good evening and thank you very much for your time. I think, look, this is a major policy that, has been instituted by the government. As Arindamji had mentioned, European and American policy has always been there in terms of recycling. And I think that, these policies that come by the government, the cost to the customer in the longer term is much better. See, when we look at the cost to the customer, when we talk about green energy, we talk about sustainability. If Corona has taught all of us something, is we have to look after our health. So if we continue the path of the current where the AQIs in our cities is over 400, the damage to our younger generations is so much that everybody's going to be in the hospital. So I think in coming back to the short-term cost to our investors, to the customers, will be that, you know, they are going to get incentives, they're going to get better vehicles, they're going to get better mileage. You know, there'll be an overall, in my opinion, a benefit. And as you use older vehicles, they are polluting more, they break down more. And I think, for me, the government policy of electrification, and we are quite a significant player in the electrification of this country, it will be much more positive that as new vehicles come in, they should be more and more electric vehicles, and that will reduce the cost.
Of course, nobody is doubting that. But Uday, correct me if I'm wrong, that a personal vehicle, a fitness test, for example, will cost about 300, 400 rupees. In commercial vehicles, it goes into 1,000. Is that correct?
Yes, sure. So the point is, you're talking about, but the older vehicles, you're looking at a one-time cost. But if you look at over a period of time, a newer vehicle will have less breakdowns. So I know you're looking at that one-time cost, but also the efficiency of the newer vehicles, the fuel in demand is less. So overall, I believe that the cost to the customer in the next 3 to 5 years is going to be less. And when you buy a vehicle, you don't look at it at a one-time cost. You look at it over a period, over a long. Anybody who keeps a vehicle keeps it for 5, 6, 7 years. And I think that the benefit of newer vehicles coming in will be much, much higher than at a one-time cost.
Right. I understand that. Let me take it forward to now Venkatesh as well. Beg your pardon, it's Venkesh. Hi, Venkesh. Thanks so much for your time and coming to FYI. I just want to understand the industry's sort of outlook on this. How exactly are auto dealers looking at this? Is obviously going to boost a lot of manufacturing as well. In fact, like I mentioned in the explainer as well, a lot of countries in fact have adopted this as a way of getting the economy back on track, manufacturing sector that is.
So thanks, Sonal, for having me. No doubt it's a burning topic as of today. And this had been in discussion for the past, 2-3 years. And our minister, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, was regularly persuasive of getting this policy. As Arvindji said, it's a concurrent subject. So it's difficult for the central to go ahead and launch a policy which affects the state too. But all in all, I am sure, and we dealers are confident that this is a very, very beneficial thing for India as a whole in terms of environment, for customers on the whole, because they'll benefit it. Auto trade also, because we'll be getting newer demand coming in because the customers will be replacing the old vehicle. And we have to consider one thing, that any vehicle purchase in India is more of an attachment. It's normally doesn't go out after 3 years or 4 years. People keep their cars for 20 years, 15 years, even if they're not driving. They have a lot of place near the villages or their home, and they just keep it there. So what this policy will help us, not today, but after 23, 24, when this actually becomes a bit of mandatory, or at least the infrastructure is ready, that it will be motivate the people to get things out. As of today, if I have a car 20 years old, and when I go to anybody to sell it, I get what, 15,000, 20,000 as a scrap. And that doesn't balance the kind of attachment I have been in that car for 10 years or 12 years. So if this policy is implemented, if this infrastructure comes in, and by scrappage, the current rate what we get of our old vehicle doubles, that will be the biggest benefit that will motivate me to go and exchange the vehicle.
Right.
And frankly, that will happen, because once a big scrappage yard comes up and collects, maybe in one district, one only comes up and collects all the vehicles from the dealers, it will have a big chunk of vehicles to scrap, take out precious metals which are requirement, minerals, and then reuse it for maybe not even back to auto trade, but it could be used in construction or wherever.
Of course, a circular economy is what you're talking about. The Prime Minister also talked loads about that. And at that point, let me bring in Pooja Rai here. Now, Pooja is the founder and CEO of Anthill Creations, and she does something very fascinating with tires. Pooja, could you first tell us what exactly is it that your company is doing, and what role will you come to play when it comes to the scrappage policy?
Hi, Sonal. So I think, what we do at Antil is basically use these waste tires and convert them into playful parks for children. So we have, built close to 300 playgrounds made out of upcycled tires and metal. So that's what we do. And I feel the scrappage policy has come at the right time and much needed, I would say. But I also felt that, there are a lot of incentives that the government is trying to have for people to, get their vehicles tested and how to basically make sure that old cars are actually discarded. But I think there is very little incentive for people in the recycling industry. So, if you just look at numbers, just tires, right? Like 981 million tires are thrown away every year. And even less than 7% is recycled. So if this new scrappage policy has come into place, I think we also need we also need some incentives for the recycling industry. And Prime Minister also, talked about how startups and new ideas and innovations can come into place. And I feel Antil is one of the examples. And I'm still thinking how more initiatives like ours can benefit from this policy.
So the entire ecosystem has actually to work for this to actually happen. And then there is this entire thing about incentives drawing this policy as well. Let's slip into a break. When we come back, I want to talk about what does this mean for the car market and on the whole. COVID was the time when we saw a lot of second-hand cars actually being purchased. People were driving themselves, and a lot of that, there was an uptake in that market. What does this policy mean for that market as well? That's coming up on the other side. Welcome back. We're talking about the new vehicle scrappage policy that has got everybody, some people very worried, others very happy. Let's go back to Rindam. Like I was saying before going on break, COVID sort of changed a lot of purchasing patterns when it came to automobile sector, right? And now we're looking at a new EV world as well coming forward. How do you see this scrappage policy changing the dynamics in the industry?
Is that question for me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, you see, world over, what has been noticed is that whenever these kind of policies were introduced, they contributed, there was a tangible impact on sales of, new vehicles or replacement vehicles. If we look at the volumes in India, for example, if you look at 2020-21, I think around 2 crores of vehicles were produced in the country. And you were referring earlier that in terms of vehicles which are at the end of their life, the figure around maybe 1 year back or 2 years back was around 80 lakhs.
Right.
Okay, now the mix is around 80% of those would be two-wheelers, around 10% would be cars, and I think around 5 to 7% would be commercial, things like buses, etc.
Right.
Or even heavy vehicles. So if we look at a end-of-life vehicle population of 80 lakhs, and we assume that even, let's say, 20% of that is brought under this policy, and because I think there's another fine print in the policy which we didn't talk about, which is that these scrappage certificates are tradable. So even someone who's scrapping his old vehicle does not want to buy a new vehicle or a replacement vehicle, whatever be the reason, because maybe his age doesn't permit buying a new vehicle, he can simply trade that certificate. Those mechanisms have to come up. But what I'm saying is those certificates are supposed to be tradable. Now, even if we assume that 25% of our stock of end-of-life vehicles are scrapped under the new policy, with suitable incentives, etc., and the requisite infrastructure, I think the impact on new vehicle sales should be around 10 to 15% in the immediate term. But the other caveat which we have to keep in mind is that many countries, while they started off with this policy, they did not continue with this policy for a prolonged period. That was one point. And the second aspect was, of course, which we are also, I think there's at least a intent of the government to get the OEMs to share the incentives which are paid to old vehicle owners who
Right.
scrap their vehicles. Even in those countries, that was the model. So, but coming back to your question of impact on the auto sector, I think it should be a tangible one, provided once the industry picks up scale.
I see. Lots of fascinating points there. Yes, we need to talk about the trading of those certificates as well. But let me quickly, I have last 1 minute. I quickly want to get a comment from both Uday and Vinkesh. Uday, first to you. Very quickly trying to understand, how do you see this rolling out and changing buying patterns here? For anybody who is owner right now is already thinking by 23, 24, what should they be doing?
Look, I'm very positive. We see this as a very positive sign for the future. I think that you asked the question to Arindamji. He stated the facts, but I think for the EV business, which we believe, and he mentioned two-wheelers, I think over the next 5 years, I think 80% of two-wheelers will be electric. We also think the cargo space will move electric with where diesel prices are. So I think overall, it's a very, very positive policy that the government is bringing, and the government is bringing multiple positive policies. I'm very excited to see what the government is doing with regard to transportation, with mobility, and with more happening on mobility, the economy will do better, a view of our 5 trillion economy. So I think overall, all the consumers and the general public, I think this is a great policy, and I think we welcome the government move on this.
All right. Last 30 seconds, Vinkesh, if you can quickly wrap it up there.
So overall, it's a good policy, like I said, and I am happy that the customer will get the benefit what he wants. So if we, like Arindamji say, you can still change hands. That means he is getting something out of his old vehicle, which is actually standing with a negligible value. Right. Another thing, the biggest thing, no doubt, environment is important. But if you remember, you're talking of 20 years back, it means it is a BS0 or some model which didn't have any safety norms also. So it is making road safe, is making road environment better, and overall improving our retails also. So I feel as an industry, as a customer also, this is the best thing to happen.
All right, so thumbs up from the industry over there. Thank you all for joining us on this program. We'll dive into this in detail later episodes as well. For now, that's it from us. Bye-bye.